Hi friends, it's Mrs. Bitz. I have you out here at the beach. We're going to take a little virtual field trip today. Before we start, I want to let you know that I am on private property with permission from the owner to be here, so we're not breaking any stay-at-home orders. Now, I have a friend that's going to help me on our field trip today. You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Leanna.
Lily, can you explain how you do school?
Yeah, I am homeschooled. That means that my mom teaches me at home, and my mom don't work. And
Your mom works hard at being your teacher because you don't have a teacher sending you schoolwork in a virtual classroom like everybody else does in my classroom right now.
Yeah.
All right, Lily and I are going to take you on a little adventure. So here we are at the beach, and as you can see with these rocks, there's all of these holes in here, and I want you to think back about what you have learned about weathering and erosion. Lily,
yeah.
what do you know about weathering and erosion? What does weathering mean, Lily?
That means that the rocks are like broken up, like in like smaller groups.
Perfect, Lily. Now, what does erosion mean?
Erosion means that the tiny rocks push it out.
So they're moved and they're swept away. So what do you think is causing the weathering and even the erosion here on the beach? What do you see happening here?
The waves are like moving up really fast.
And is water strong?
Yes, very strong.
Very strong. So do you think that the waves and the water have caused this weathering and erosion over a short period of time or a really long period of time? Really long. Let's go explore and see what has happened. So as you can see here, there's these holes in the rocks. We're going to try and get way in here with the camera. Over long periods of time, and I mean thousands of years, the waves have been washing up into these rocks, and little by little the water has eaten pieces of the rock away and broken it down into the sand that we see below us. That's the weathering part. Then the waves come back up and they take that sand and they move it away. Sometimes it gets washed out into the ocean where there's sandbars. Sometimes it gets pushed back up and brings more sand on the beach. All right, boys and girls, I want to show you some of the animals that you can see in this beach rock environment. And habitat. So, as you know, I mean, right now, this looks like just a bunch of rocks. Doesn't look like there's much life on here. But you have to look closer, right, Lily?
Yeah.
So, why don't you show us the first thing that you saw?
Okay, first thing we saw a clam.
Ooh, now this one is, do you see how it's black? It's really little. This is called a mussel, not M-U-S-C-L-E-S, like your muscles in your arm. Show me your muscles, Lily. Not like that kind of mussel. It's a mussel, M-U-S-S-E-L, which is, yes, very much like a clam. That's a very small one. I see another one, I believe, right here. So we have mussels that are starting to grow. Awesome.
The other thing we saw is...
What did we see over here? What is that thing called? What are those little things? Starts with a B.
Barnacles.
Okay, these are barnacles. Do you see how the top, right now they're closed up, but when the water level rises, and that one right there might be a little bit of a easier one to see. When the water level rises and the very top of this thing will open up and little cilia, filters, will come out so it can filter feed. Now, next to these barnacles, there's a whole cluster of barnacles there. We see these other things that kind of look like barnacles, but if you look closely, they don't have an opening on the top. This is called a limpet. A limpet is a little bit different than a barnacle. Now, I want to show you another, hang on, we'll get to that one in just a second. Now, this down here, if you look closely, these are some of the most prehistoric looking animals I've ever seen in my life. I don't know the scientific name, but I'm going to do some research and find it out, so look in the comments. But when I was growing up, this is called a curb. This is a very hard shell around the outside. This is a live animal, and around here is kind of fuzzy. You can pry these off of the rocks, and I used to use them as bait for fishing, and sometimes we would even eat them because Mrs. Bitz grew up on a boat in the middle of nowhere, so we had to do that sometimes. There's a couple more curbs here on the rocks. All right, and also if you look closer, you can see all these tiny, tiny little snails everywhere. Now, we found a bigger snail over here. It's right here, Lily. Okay, so can you see that snail in there? This snail, go ahead and try and get that out of there for us, Lily. It's called a bloody tooth. It is in there pretty tight. So that snail was very stuck. I was going to try and show you why it was called a bloody tooth. Some of the markings on it look like if you lost a tooth and what would be left behind there. So I want to show you this spot here. So it is low tide right now. And you see this ledge that these rocks are creating. So when it's high tide, all of this stuff under here is underwater, and it makes perfect little areas for fish and lobster and other animals to hide. So this is also a great part of this habitat to understand. See how there's little holes and things in there? So, Lily, what do you think would happen if a large predator, like maybe a shark or a really big fish, was chasing a smaller fish in here at high tide? What do you think would happen?
Maybe like rocks.
They would hide in the rocks, and if the smaller fish went through like a hole back in there, would the bigger fish be able to get to it? No.
The big fishes are so huge.
So huge, that's...
Tiny rocks and tiny holes.
So, boys and girls, we're going to end our virtual field trip now.
And it's me again, Leanna, and I just wanted to say have a good day and bye.
Thank you for joining us on our field trip. I hope my students enjoy this.